What happens if the US dollar crashes? Imagine a world where the value of your currency has plummeted so dramatically that even the most basic of necessities requires you to cart around a hefty sum of cash just to make a purchase. It sounds like a scene straight out of a dystopian movie, but for many countries in history, this was a harsh reality. The aftermath of World War I saw Germany struggling with hyperinflation that reduced the German mark to a mere fraction of its former value. Picture it, people shuffling down the streets with wheelbarrows overflowing with stacks of cash just to buy a loaf of bread or a carton of eggs. The economy was in shambles, and the once mighty German mark was no longer recognized as a symbol of stability and prosperity. But could this same fate befall the mighty US dollar? It's a question that's been on the minds of many experts, and it's time to dive into the possibility of such an outcome. In this video, we'll take a closer look and examine what it would take for the US dollar to follow in its footsteps. From the impact of the government's policies to the role of the global economy, we'll explore the various factors that could influence the value of the world's most widely used currency and how it should be prevented. So, sit back and join us on a journey through history and economics as we delve into the question, what would happen if the US dollar crashed? The consequences of a currency collapse. A look at the dollar. Currency collapses have happened all over the world. From Argentina to Zimbabwe, it happens when a country's currency is deemed as having very little value, causing a lack of trust in that currency and rendering it almost worthless. In the case of the dollar, if it were to suddenly lose its value, the scenario would be chaotic. People would panic, trying to sell their dollars while no one would want to buy them. Foreign governments holding treasury bills, notes, and bonds in dollars would also want to get rid of them, as it would investors. This would mark the beginning of a currency collapse, and the worst possible outcome would be for the dollar becoming worthless. The impact of currency collapse on imported goods and inflation. In a world where the dollar has lost its value, imported goods would become more expensive due to inflation. This is because the price of things goes up when the cost of importing goods increases. In the case of hyperinflation, a loaf of bread might cost millions. This may sound crazy, but it has happened in other countries. People might start getting paid millions just so they can afford basic necessities. Outside the country, the currency would be considered unreliable and its value would be low. Causes of a weakened dollar and the start of a currency crisis. So, how could the dollar lose its value in the first place? There are two scenarios to consider. First, the dollar would have to weaken, marking the start of a crisis. The dollar has declined in value before, losing 6% of its value between 2002 and 2018. This decline was due to the increase in US debt, which went up from $6 trillion to $22 trillion. The government could also weaken the dollar to pay off its debts. Another reason why the dollar could suddenly lose its value is if it were to lose its status as the world's reserve currency. The dollar is currently the global currency of choice, with about half of border-to-border transactions being made using it. Central banks all over the world must hold a reserve of dollars, including entities like the US Federal Reserve System, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, and the European Central Bank. However, if the dollar were to lose its value and countries holding it began to lose trust, they might start considering using a different currency as the world's reserve currency. For example, what if China were to say that the yuan should be the world's reserve currency, or the EU were to claim that the euro should be the top dog? If the dollar starts to weaken, countries holding it, like China and Japan, might start to be concerned. Around $6 trillion of US debt is owned by other countries, with China and Japan being the biggest owners. If these countries were to suddenly sell their dollars and the value of the dollar were to decline, it would be a disaster for the US economy. As its major consumer is the United States, it would be like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Potential consequences of a dollar collapse. In a hypothetical scenario where China and Japan do sell their dollars and others follow, the decline of the dollar would go into full swing. Globally, people would be selling their dollars and buying more stable currencies like the euro or putting their money into commodities like gold. This would lead to interest rates increasing and the cost of borrowing money going up. The stock market would also take a significant hit, causing widespread panic and chaos. The US economy would enter a downward spiral as the value of dollar continues to decline and the cost of goods and services becomes unaffordable. This would lead to widespread job losses, with businesses shutting down and people struggling to make ends meet. In such a scenario, the government would have to take a quick and decisive action to prevent the total collapse of the dollar. They would implement measures like printing more money, increasing interest rates, or even imposing capital controls, which would restrict the flow of money out of the country. However, These measures would have their own consequences, such as further inflation, which would make the situation even worse. Preventing the collapse of the dollar. So, what can we do to prevent the collapse of the dollar? Preventing the collapse of the dollar requires a multi-pronged approach. Maintaining trust in the currency is the most important factor, and it starts with ensuring the stability of the economy. This can be achieved through reducing the country's debt and maintaining a stable and predictive monetary policy. The government should also be proactive in monitoring the global economy and responding to any changes in the financial landscape. One way to reduce the country's debt is to focus on fiscal responsibility. This means cutting down on unnecessary government spending, reducing the national debt, and balancing the budget. Additionally, the government should consider implementing tax reforms to increase revenue and reduce its dependence on borrowing. By reducing its debt, the US would become a more attractive investment for foreign investors, which would strengthen the dollar's value. Another key factor in maintaining the stability of the dollar is having a transparent and predictable monetary policy. This means ensuring that the central bank is transparent in its actions, communicating when its intentions clearly, and following through on its promises. When the central bank makes predictable changes to the money supply, it sends a signal to investors that government is committed to maintaining stability and that the dollar is a safe investment. In addition to ensuring stability, the US should also focus on strengthening its own economy. This could be done through investing in key industries like technology, manufacturing, and infrastructure. The government could also consider implementing policies that would encourage a more resilient economy. The US would be better equipped to weather any potential shocks caused by the dollar collapse. Another way to prevent the collapse of the dollar is by diversifying the economy. Currently, the US economy is heavily dependent on its service sector, which is vulnerable to global economic shifts. By diversifying its economy, the US could reduce its dependence on any one sector and become more resilient to economic shocks. Ultimately, the US government and its citizens must take a proactive approach to preventing the collapse of the dollar. This requires a combination of fiscal responsibility, monetary stability, and economic resilience. By taking these steps, the US can maintain the trust of its citizens, investors, and global community, ensuring the continued stability of the dollar. Financial preparedness. Despite the low likelihood of a dollar collapse, it's always important to be prepared for the worst. The world has seen many financial crises in the past, and it's crucial to be proactive in preventing one's financial well-being. It's crucial to understand what a currency collapse doesn't just affect the economy of the country that it happens in, but it has a ripple effect on the global economy as well. A strong economy is essential to maintaining trust in a currency, which is why it's important to take steps to make it more resilient. While the likelihood of another dollar collapse may be low, it's always important to be prepared. By taking steps to diversify your investments, reduce your debt, and stay informed, you'll be better equipped to handle any financial storms that may come your way, protecting your financial future. In the final analysis, while the likelihood of a currency collapse in the United States might seem distant, it would be a mistake to dismiss the possibility entirely. The dollar holds a critical position in the international economic landscape, and its downfall would not only send shockwaves through the American economy, but it would also have far-reaching and profound ramifications on a global scale. The idea of a currency collapse can be unsettling, but by taking proactive measures to safeguard your financial stability, you can minimize the impact of such an event and secure a more confident future for yourself and those you hold dear. By being mindful of potential risks and taking steps to mitigate them, you can ensure that you and your loved ones will be protected should the worst happen. In short, taking action now to protect your finances may prove to be the difference between weathering a potential currency collapse and being caught in its aftermath. So don't wait until it's too late. Start taking steps today to ensure your financial future for tomorrow.